Scripture.
The first reading comes from Philippians chapter 4, verses 1 to 13. Word of the Lord. Therefore, my brothers, you whom I love and long for, my joy and crown, that is how you should stand firm in the Lord. I plead with Euodia and I plead with Syntyche to agree with each other in the Lord. Yes, and I ask you, loyal yokefellow, help these women who have contended at my side in the cause of the gospel, along with Clement and the rest, my fellow workers, whose names are in the book of life. Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put into practice, and the God of peace will be with you. I rejoice greatly in the Lord that at last you have renewed your concern for me. Indeed, you have been concerned, but you had no opportunity to show it. I am not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content, whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do everything through him who gives me strength. Now our Old Testament reading. It comes from Isaiah chapter 1, verses 13 through 17. Stop bringing meaningless offerings. Your incense is detestable to me. New moons, Sabbaths, and convocations. I cannot bear your evil assemblies. Your new moon's festivals and your appointed feasts my soul hates. They have become a burden to me. I am weary of bearing them. When you spread out your hands in prayer, I will hide my eyes from you. Even if you offer many prayers, I will not listen. Your hands are full of blood. Wash and make yourselves clean. Take your evil deeds out of my sight. Stop doing wrong. Learn to do right. Seek justice. Encourage the oppressed. Defend the cause of the fatherless. Plead the case of the widow. The word of the Lord.
Did we go wrong? Did we get here? Here of all places. The world. How many times have you said that to yourself in the last 8 years, last 6 days? Oh, did we get so lost, so blind, that we can't, as Jesus put it, see the people, the trees, that we can't see the forest through? Or the way I like to put it today, that we don't see people in just agendas. You ever had that? So lost that you can't find your way through? When I was a kid, our family used to take a lot of vacations on the road. Traveled one time from South Dakota to Washington. We took a trip all the way down to Florida once. I think if there would have been a road to get there, we would have drove to Hawaii if we could have. And as a result, we had a lot of these moments. Dad, middle of the night, would pull the VW Bug over at the side of the road, make some disgusting noises, and Mom would get out the flashlight, and Dad would pull the map out of the glove compartment, and Dad would start those mumbling dad sounds we all know. I can't even find where we're at. And Mom would mumble sometimes if she was under her. And Dad would turn and glare a bit, and then quietly sometimes turn it right side up. Oh, there we are, he'd say. Now we're on the right track. Hi, Mom. Dad. That's not an easy thing to do, is it? Speak to a soul who doesn't quite know they're that lost yet. But one of the reasons Dad would take it and listen to her is that she never said it sarcastically. It was a very gentle, loving reminder. Had a knack for it. I would call that an art, by the way, and not many of us have it. The Apostle Paul wrote this letter that Sam read, fourth chapter, to the church in Philippi while he was in prison. We rarely remember that part. Here he is, telling us to rejoice. He's in prison, man. I mean, what? Who's rejoicing there, right? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. But what we hear from Paul is not the angst of the middle of the night, where he's kind of lost in the middle of the night. Hear from him this morning, that middle. On the mornings after he made it through, on the morning after he's seen the light from the lighthouse showing him the way. Today we hear Paul on the morning after the storm, trying to be a beacon of light. Church out Philippi, trying to give them a hand. A church that, like him, is going through the darkest part of night, and who don't maybe know that there is even a light out there. And so he speaks words, such profound words, words that I think should be on all of our hearts today as we ponder the years to come. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, put your mind on these. This past, I sent out an email asking you to share some words to help you difficult. I see these words kind of like our lighthouse, a fountain of wisdom for a world that's lost way. I got this idea, by the way, when I went with Cindy to the SAM, to the Seattle Arts Museum. And there I saw this exhibit by Joyce Scott called Walk a Mile, My Dream. To be honest with you, I didn't know who Joyce C. Scott was, or I went to the exhibit. Her testimony. And since my son Wes was dating an artist who uses the same mediums, we thought we'd check it out. An event. Who knew that someone who worked with cloth and wool and beads and street items could be so profound and speak so prophetically Joyce C. Scott was speaking with the same love in her words that my mother saying to all of us, walk through, turn the map right side up, my friend. Hear the words and the voices of those who you have never heard. Change the way in which you see. A prophet, an Amos, a Hosea, maybe even a Jeremiah, certainly a Harriet Tubman. Middle of the first room of this exhibit is a chair. And on this chair were two quilts, quilted by Joyce C. Scott's. Feel and almost experience the beautiful and old as they were, they still spoke for 100 years later. And on that chair, around it, Joyce C. Scott had placed all the books that had formed and I thought this was her canon. You know what a canon is? I think you might know the one way if you're a pirate, but it's a different canon. We're personal canon. Her list of books that have formed and shaped her through. We have a canon. If you know what it is, it's 6 books. We have a canon. Call that the Bible. Our 66 books that form and shape us. 66 quilts, if you will. 66 books represent 66 communities and their stories. Creation stories, history lessons, great leaders who have fallen and risen again, stories of what I would call chain breakers, people in our story who have broken out and overcome amazing obstacles and broken into a new way of being, like Miriam, Paul and Phoebe, Sarah and Abraham, Mary and Martha, James and John. We could go on. Like Nathan. Do you remember Nathan? Bible. Stood up to great kings like after had cold-bloodedly killed Uriah the Hittite's wife. Killed Uriah the Hittite, just so he could sleep with Uriah's wife, said, pointed the looked right. You are that man. Full like Isaiah, who stood up to the leaders in his country and said, your hands are full of blood. Wash and make yourself clean. Take your evil deeds out of my sight. Stop doing wrong. Learn to do right. Seek justice. Defend the oppressed. Up the cause of the fatherless. Plead the case of the widow. And people like Abraham, but let Jacob like there are 17 prophetic books. But for some reason, our culture decided to bury them. Probably because, to be honest, they make us feel pretty uncomfortable. Right? We don't like to be uncomfortable. They seem to feel a little heavy-handed sometimes. There, my dad confronting me as a teenager when I've done something stupid with my friends and gotten caught. I mean, sometimes he would get mad, right? And we don't like prophets sometimes. This week, the Right Reverend Marion Edgar, Episcopalian Bishop of Washington, was part of a larger post-inaugural day interfaith ceremony in Washington, D.C. at the Washington National. Our new president and vice president there, and at one point, Woody turned to our new president and said, in the name of God, I ask you to have mercy upon the people in our country who are now. They are maybe gay or lesbian or transgender children and Democratic, Republican, and independent families. They go to our churches, some who fear for their lives. Now, can argue, stay here. So, depending on your parties. But what you can't argue is that this is church is called play. Sometimes we're called to share the prophetic, and that's what she don't have to like. Jesus in our for Christians, he has the main seat, kind of, right? Believe it or not, Jesus sometimes, more often than we like to, is with a stick. He's not just a comforter or a defender, also a prophet and a defender of the uses different techniques, though, sometimes. In fact, created a whole literary genre intended to be stories that. I remember any? Spit them out. Talent. That's prodigal. Parable of talents. Parable. Some people are hard to see. It's Jesus' way of turning our map right side up. Being my mom saying, you got the thing on the right way? I mean, you maybe should turn it the other way. By the way, during Lent this year, we're going to do a study on some of the parables in Matthew's gospel. And we're using a wonderful guide named Sam Sang. And Sam is with us today. He's been with us for a while. He's written this book, Right Kingdom, Wrong Stories, a backward reading of Matthew's parables. And in it, he warns of the dangers of reading these parables only one-dimensionally. He asks that we read them from both sides. Here's what he writes. Why do we need to do both sides of the story? When told upside down, we can explore how telling the parable another way could impact Matthew's audience and their choice to live their lives differently. Indeed, many in the modern faith community are unconsciously living the backward story, dissolving all the tensions Jesus' ministry had created back in his day and ours. It is important to look at the backward way so that modern Christ followers can become aware. By living the opposite value from Jesus, modern believers, as well as ancient ones, actually become unfaithful to Jesus' kingdom message. In a way, I think Sam is trying to get us to realize, just like my mother, that our map is upside down. So again, I want to get back just for a moment to this lighthouse idea, this chair idea. What are the words that give us light in this world, that give you light in this world? And how can we keep these words lighting a light to this world that sometimes is so lost? Cindy and I recently watched a movie, and it's a beautiful movie, by the way. All ages could watch this. It's called The Story of, it's The Island of Lost Girls. And it's a story about these girls, and there's 3 of them, and they're orphans. They don't have a mom and dad. Nobody seems to want them in the orphanage. And so one day, nobody's really watching that much. And so they head out and they decide to go to the beach. They live, I think, somewhere on a beach somewhere. And so they go to the beach, and they're just little. I mean, I think maybe the oldest is 7. There's a 5-year-old, maybe a 3-year-old. And we watch them playing on the beach, and they're having a great time. And then they find a surfboard, and we all start getting a little nervous. And soon the littlest of them gets on the surfboard, and she gets caught in a current and starts floating out into the sea. And nobody is even watching except the 2 girls finally notice her. And they swim out there, and they get on the thing too, and they try to turn it back. No way, man. Can't beat that current. So they just start heading out into the sea. And it's scary for all of us. And then we watch as the next morning they wake up and they see an island. And on the island, there's this beautiful lighthouse. And they are so excited to see this lighthouse. Wow, lighthouse, safety. There's got to be a keeper of that lighthouse up there. They'll help us find home. Oh, but let me tell you, it takes them forever to get there. I mean, it is tense all the way. But finally, through all sorts of things, they make it to the lighthouse, and they run up to the top of the lighthouse, waiting and watching and screaming, we're here, help, help, help. And they get up to the top of the lighthouse, and there is no keeper at all there. No keeper of the lighthouse. It has been manned by machines since 2015. And we don't even know what happens to him after that. It's kind of a happy ending. But it wasn't for me. It bugged me, Who's keeping the lighthouse? Right? I mean, who's keeping the light on for this world today? We need to keep that light on. We need to keep our light fed. We need the words in our hearts. We need to know what those words are and begin to breathe them out into our community. Marge Kuykendall shared with me, I think it's somewhere, maybe. Here it is. A beautiful words by Stephen Charleston. And listen to these words. I just thought they were so hopeful in this time. And I have a copy of several copies back there if you'd like to take it home. But he writes this: come stand here, all of you who are frightened and confused, come stand here. Here on the high ground of reason, here on the rock of faith unshaken, here where you can see tomorrow without the hype in the spin. Come stand here, for there is room for everyone, room for people of every color and culture, of every memory and story. Come stand here in the midst of the madness, here where others can see us and take hope. Do not be afraid, but believe in the foundation beneath us: justice and mercy, truth and integrity, common sense and compassion. We may have moved from them, but they have not moved from us.